All right, let me start with, I'm going to start with when I came here in 77. Actually, before that, in the early 1970s, I was with Tracy Locke. And what I was decided I want to go back to school. And so what I was doing is looking at where would I go to school, and I want to get a master's and all that
So
sort of
you were down in Dallas at that point.
No, I was living in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, okay. I thought they were down there. Shows what I know.
Well, yeah, but the home office of Tracy Locke is in Dallas. I moved in and out there 5 times, and I was running branch offices, and I was running branch office in Columbus, Ohio at the time, or trying to rehab one that a guy had destroyed for us. So in any case, I started looking around for schools that had good advertising programs, and at that time, the two that were recommended the most highly were University of Illinois and Michigan State.
Okay.
And Syracuse. So I went and looked at all 3 of those schools, and finally ended up going to school at Michigan State.
Mm-hmm.
Northwestern didn't even show up on the radar because Northwestern was considered to be too applied.
Oh, rather than theoretical.
Yeah. So if you're going to go get a master's degree, the people that were advising me said, well, you need to go to either Illinois or Michigan State or Syracuse because they've got good academic programs.
Okay.
So I go off to Michigan State, and I learn once I'm there that the penis envy of every place is Northwestern. Everybody's trying to figure out a way to get to Northwestern. So I finished my PhD at MSU in '77.
Okay.
In July of '77. I don't know. Finished in June of '77. I came here in July of '77.
Okay.
When I came here, there were several things in place. There was a relatively small graduate program. And by relatively small, I'm talking 40, 50 people.
Okay.
I know more than that, probably low 40s, 40, 45, something like that. There was an undergraduate advertising program, which was running primarily out of Medill.
Okay.
Which was essentially it was almost the master's program light.
Okay.
It's taught by the same faculty.
Okay.
And it was in the process of being phased out because they couldn't figure out how to separate the 2 of them and how to make the 2 of them differentiated and that sort of thing.
Now, is there something in the university charter or whatever it is about non-business courses for undergraduates and a prohibition?
No.
No. Okay.
No. It is an unwritten rule.
One of those.
That you will not have business courses at Northwestern.
Lest our students become employable.
Well, no, it's not just that, but the whole purpose of this school was liberal arts education.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so there's just sort of been this unwritten rule
Right.
that we're not going to have business courses at the undergraduate level.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, when I came here in '77, they were in the process of phasing out the undergraduate program, which went away in either '78 or '79. So it's one of the things that happens is it's hard to separate graduate students from undergraduate students because unless you look at their degree, you don't know which program they came out of.
Mm-hmm.
When I came here, there were 5 faculty, and there was the system was set up. It was a 9-month master's.
Okay.
So if you had an undergraduate degree in advertising or marketing or business administration, you could come in September, and you would graduate the following June. If you didn't have any background, if you were coming as a rehab or if you'd been a library science major or something like that, you had to come in the summer, and you took 4 courses.
Okay.
They were 2 5-week sessions. One was a creative course, a media course, advertising management course, and a research course.
Mhm.
So that was essentially to try to get you up to speed to what the others were coming in the fall. Most of, at that time in the graduate program, probably 2/3 were in the summer program and 1/3 were came in the fall.
Okay.
And we never were more than about 40, 45, something like that.
Mhm.
There were 5 faculty. Vern Freiberger was the chairman. He had sort of invented the curriculum. He had been over at the old School of Commerce. They all came out of the School of Commerce when they were transferred it all to Medill. And they had joint appointments. So I was the first one that came that was only a journalism appointment.
Okay.
So I had no tie to Kellogg. The rest of them to the School of Commerce, which all the rest of them did. But there's Freiberger, who was head of the department, and he taught the management courses. There was Jack Scissors, who taught media.
Okay.
There was Frank, forgotten his name.
We could check.
Evans, Frank Evans,
Okay.
who taught research. And when I came here, it was John Amy who taught marketing management.
Okay.
So there were faculty of, and I came in and I taught the creative courses and strategy courses. Okay.
And let me ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
Is this what I've heard this referred to as the ad grad program?
Mm-hmm.
Is that makes sense?
Yeah.
And as I reach out to people from the 70s and 80s, I'm struck by, well, at least of the unrepresentative group of people who've responded to me.
Yeah.
How many of them have landed in agencies? And was there more of a preparing you to go downtown and work for Burnett emphasis?
The whole focus of this program was to prepare you to go to work in an agency.
Okay.
If you wandered off into a client company, you were considered a black sheep.
Okay.
But the whole focus was agencies, and
Right.
this was really the agency outlet. And if you go back and look, the people who came out of here in the 60s, 70s, 80s,
yeah,
by and large, all went into agencies. About 80% of the students went to an agency.
Right.
And the whole system was set up to, you graduated from here, then you went into the agency and you went into the agency training program.
Right. Okay.
And
And this is back when agency training programs existed.
You went to Burnett, or you went to
Footcone or
Thompson, or
ADB,
Footcone, or whoever it was, and they all had training programs. And so you went immediately into that. The agencies were recruited heavily here.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we were running a program downtown, which is what Marty Core has reinvented, that Freiberger started, which was a cooperative program between the 4As and Medill to take young people in the agency and put them through about an 18-week course of campaign management.
Mm-hmm.
So we had that program going where we were training people that the agencies had hired that didn't have any background. We were bringing our students in and putting those people in the agencies. And it was not unusual to walk into an agency and find 15, 20 Medill or Northwestern graduates in the agency.
Yeah.
And they all did pretty well.
Yeah, even now I'm hearing back from lots of SVPs and EVPs, many done creative, not account services.
Yeah.
In the big shops down Burnett and other big shops downtown.
And the only reason they're successful is because Don Schultz taught them how to think.
There you go.
No,
but it's funny. But for the downtown program, it strikes me as comparable to now that the agencies aren't doing training themselves; they're co-oping it with us. Okay.
Well, the guy who was teaching creative here, and who left, who went to Syracuse, whose place I took,
Okay.
was a guy named Ed Stevens.
Okay.
And Ed had been here for maybe 8 or 10 years, something like that. The other name that you might hear would be Stuart Henderson Britt.
Okay.
Stu Britt was a researcher. He had kind of invented the Chicago School of Research.
Which is what?
Approach. The research approach, which is primarily the way he was doing it was in depth and
Okay.
that sort of thing. So he was the Ernest Dichter of Chicago.
Okay.
But Stu Britt was a nut, kind of. Well, I mean, he was unique to the extent that he every time you see him, he had a Rolls Royce, and he always had two dogs on a leash, two big dogs on a leash, and he wore a Sherlock Holmes cloak, the kind of, and
Boy.
yeah, and he was a character.
Yes.
Anyway, but he was on the faculty here too, as well. So in any case, we were preparing these people to go to work for agencies.
Okay.
And many of them did very, very well. And I mean, Mary Baglivo graduated from here,
Mm-hmm.
and Mark Puccini graduated from here,
Mm-hmm.
and a whole bunch of senior agency people all graduated here in the, that would have been in the 70s, I guess, 70s, early 80s, something like that. So there was a faculty here of 5, and Frank Evans had gotten up in years and retired and went away, and we brought in a guy named Hugh Cannon.
Mm-hmm.
And Hugh Cannon came in to teach the research courses. And Hugh is now over at Wayne State, so he hasn't ever gone away, but he did not get tenure here, so he went off to Wayne State, and John Amy left and went to Y&R as head of their creative services department.
Okay.
So there's not been a huge amount of turnover in this faculty ever.
What was the program like physically then? Was everybody in FISC 111? How did it work?
All courses were all taught in FISC 111.
Okay.
They were all was lockstep. Everybody took
No electives.
No electives. Everybody took exactly the same courses.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody. What else was differentiating about it? Not much else. I mean, it was a 12-course sequence,
Okay.
essentially designed to get you ready for the agency business.
And this was late Mad Men days.
Yeah.
Pre, early ad conglomerate days.
Very much.
There was Interpublic, but that was kind of it. Pre WPP.
Yeah, it was always pre
Omnicom.
Yeah. So the thing that happened.
So there were still big standalone agencies, many times with founders still present.
Mm-hmm.
Or second generation
The
management.
thing that happened here, and what forced the change here, is we had, and I've said this over and over, we had the most magnificent training program and preparation program and educational program for agency people that the world has ever known.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is in the beginning of the early 80s, money started shifting out of advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Went to sales promotion, went to PR, went to direct marketing, went to all these other things.
My people, the below the line people.
Yeah, the tacky guys. Well, no, this is before direct marketing. This is before the direct marketing people ever did very much of anything.
No, it was sales promotion.
Sales promotion, it was all sales promotion.
Yeah. And there was at that
So
point
it
a question
created-
of who did what with who.
It created a problem to the extent that what started to happen in the agencies was they started to consolidate.
Mhm.
One would buy another.
Right.
So where we had been placing 2 people at Cunningham and Walsh,
Mm-hmm.
whoever bought Cunningham and Walsh had been recruiting 2 other people. So when they combined, they still recruited 2.
Mm-hmm.
So what we had was a magnificent product for a declining market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's when I became the chair.
Okay. And did everybody else take a step back? I don't have the impression that being department chair is a great job.
Well, I was very fortunate. because we had a unique situation. When I became the department chair, I'd been in the place for about maybe 6 months. And Dick Christian, who was one of the original people at Marsteller, he and Bill Marsteller founded the old Marsteller agency.
Yep.
And he and Bill Marsteller died. And so Dick was running Marsteller, which is a very strong B2B, headquartered here in Chicago.
Sure.
And so Dick got an offer from Y&R.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted in their inimitable fashion, we don't have any B2B, so let's go buy one. We'll go buy Marsteller. So they bought Marsteller. Dick stayed for a little while and said, "We're going to really screw this thing up."
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't take early retirement. He was retirement age at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Came out here and became the associate dean at Medill.
Okay.
And he and I were the ones that put this thing together.
Okay.
And he stayed for about 2 or 3 years. He and I came up with the first thing we did is we said we've got to do something, we've got to add some things to the curriculum. Because what we've been teaching essentially was all agency advertising related stuff.
Yeah.
So we added direct marketing, and that's when Ted Spiegel had been Dick's client at Marsteller. And so that's where that connection came from. So he came here. We brought in Tom Harris.
Okay.
From Golan Harris.
Golan Harris, yeah.
Tom was retiring, so we said, okay, we need a corporate PR program.
Right.
So we brought him in, brought Tom Harris in, brought Ted in. So in essence, they were the ones that were sort of putting together what we needed to do in direct and in corporate PR.
And as I look at the LinkedIn profiles of people who came out of that period of time, there was a period of time when they'd gone past the MSA advertising degree, and I see people with stating, and you can say whatever you want, of course, but masters in corporate public relations, masters in direct marketing.
We had those.
Yeah, and masters in IMC, advertising and
integrated marketing,
which seemed to be late 80s,
that was
early
the first
90s.
One. Yeah, that was the late 80s, early 90s. The first thing we did is we added the corporate PR and we added the direct marketing.
Okay.
Those were separate tracks.
Okay.
And they were run as separate tracks.
Okay.
So we went from 45 people to about 80 or 90 in a couple of years.
Okay. Still next door?
It was still, yeah. Yeah,
okay,
it was
still 111.
It was still all 111. I mean,
or 111 and 311 and
111, 311, and some other places over there.
Okay.
But we were bursting at the seams.
Right.
So in any case, we had 3 tracks, and the faculty was very resistant to calling it to going to integration.
Okay. Now let me just hold for a minute, because also as we start to move into the late 80s, early 90s, Martin had come in at that point from Michigan State, hadn't he? So he was, and the rumors are true, he was your graduate assistant over there?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay. Well, because we've all been wondering where Martin came from.
Well, he came from Michigan State.
Okay.
All right. Before that, when I became chair, we had to have someone who's going to teach. Creative.
Okay.
Because I'd been teaching creative. So I found Stan Tannenbaum.
Okay.
And Stan had retired from Kenyon and Eckert and whoever else he was with, and whatever else he had been doing. So Stan came out from downtown. I found Lisa Fortini Campbell.
Sure.
To teach consumer behavior.
Okay.
So I brought her in.
She was in the agency business.
Yeah,
she was at Riney at that point, I think.
Yeah, she was head of Riney,
yeah.
and either she got kicked out or she decided that she couldn't deal with Riney anymore.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, she left, and she was floating around and called me and said, I'd like to come out and talk to you, because she had a PhD from this. She has a PhD from University of Washington. So she was a consumer behavior person.
And took a wrong turn into the agency business.
No, she was research at Lear Burnett.
Okay.
And she was at Burnett for like 10 years. And then I don't know how she got in, but I think she would tell you that she took a wrong turn to get into writing.
Okay.
But that's another story. So I brought her in, and then we brought in Tom Harris and Ted.
Right.
And Ray Ewing.
Well, Paul was here in the mid-'80s. I mean, he was just a couple of years out of the program, wasn't he?
Well, Paul has an undergraduate. Well, no, he didn't have an undergraduate.
Paul
has a master's degree from here.
Yeah, right.
And he wanted to get a PhD.
Right.
So I went over to the School of Communication and made a deal with the comm people. And I said, we don't have a PhD program, but I've got a guy that I want to put in a PhD program.
Okay.
And I said, we'll do this. You teach him his research sequence, and we'll do all the rest of the content stuff over here, which we did.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul went through that. His wife went through that.
Okay.
That's where he met his wife.
Okay.
Beth Barnes, who's now the director of the School of Journalism at University of Kentucky.
But Beth was at Syracuse at one point, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I met her there. Actually.
Yeah. Well, and that's how she got her PhD here.
Okay. Okay.
But it was a split program that I'd set up over at the School of Communication.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had a couple of other people. One who was a woman who was just crazy, just plain crazy. Anyway, we had maybe a half a dozen people went through that program.
And Clark was up at Madison at that point?
Clark was at Madison.
Right.
So I was the chair.
Yeah.
And then Stan, I said, I'm tired of doing this. So Stan took over as chairman.
Okay.
So Stan ran the program for maybe 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then about that time, Martin was the chairman of the advertising department of Michigan State.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was head of the advertising department there.
Okay.
He was like 1,500 students over there in that undergraduate.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge program at that time. Anyway, he said, I don't really want to deal with this anymore. I said, well, why don't you come on over here? So he came here.
Okay.
And
did you know Martin from your Michigan State days?
he and I were in PhD program together.
Okay.
So we've been together. We've been ever since we were in a PhD program.
Got it.
And he was 1 year ahead of me.
Okay. Okay.
So I was his graduate assistant, if there was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew there was some Michigan State connection. I didn't understand.
So if there was that sort of. But so then Martin came here from Michigan State.
Okay.
And then we hired Clark.
Okay. Okay.
Because Tom Harris had decided he didn't want to keep doing this, and he wanted to go off and whatever Tom Harris does. So he left, and we hired Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, Martin was the chair. And I moved over and became associate dean for the School of Journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a battle with the provost.
It's a long tradition.
Yeah, a tradition of having battles with the provost. Essentially, the provost wanted to try to do a couple of things, and I said, "That's not right. You can't do that. That's not fair to the students or anybody else." So I said, "I'm going to resign." And no, there was all this folderol about don't resign. You can't do this. You can't quit in the middle of this thing, and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so I went back and I started teaching in the classroom again, and that's about the time I discovered the phased retirement program.
Okay. Now, is this something you discovered when it was being imposed upon you?
No. I saw this thing, and I had been doing I was doing quite a bit of consulting work, and there was a group in Dallas which initially was the research department for Tracy Locke, which turned into Target Base.
Okay.
Do you know who Target Base
Yeah,
is?
well, it's the 3-in-1. They rolled them all together. And they had yeah.
Well, when I guess they were on the com at that point.
Mm-hmm.
When they came to buy Tracy Locke, Morris Hyde said he didn't want to sell. He and Bud Phillips were running, Bud Phillips was running Mark, and he said, "I don't want to sell Mark." So they didn't sell Mark. So I became a consultant to Mark.
Okay.
And at that time, Mark was trying to figure out how to grow, and they wanted to grow internationally. So I became their scout
Mm-hmm.
for helping them find acquisitions, and that's where I met Clive Humby. Because I tried to acquire Clive Humby before
Sure.
he got hooked up with Tesco. I tried to buy a company in Australia, which was Simon Richards, which was a direct marketing group. Who else did we had made runs at? 4 or 5 other organizations. In any case, I was working with Clive in London, and had gone on the board of Simon Richards in Australia. And when I saw this thing that said 60% of your salary for 50% of your time, I said, "I'll take it."
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I started that.
Okay.
Um,
But let me loop around back here because we're now at a point where, let's say we have 3 forces coming together.
Yeah.
And you're standing in the middle. And you've just talked about them. We've got globalization.
Yeah.
Demanded by, the global presence of essentially American brands and trying to figure out what to do overseas.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, you've got the financialization of what was the agency business.
I called it the MBA.
Right, where basically the Sachis moved in and showed that they could manage the money better than the founders.
Yeah.
And were able to take the founders off the block and roll them up into conglomerates.
Yeah, that's what they do.
And finally, you've got all of this technology stuff, the data stuff, which where, in my part of the world, we went from junk mail to database marketers in about 8 or 10 years.
About 30 minutes.
Yeah, but we were the only people who had the conceptual framework to deal with all this new technology,
Yeah.
and everybody else had to deal with it.
Yeah.
And there were kind of client demands to deal with that stuff too.
Yeah.
So that now, very rarely does it matter that I'm still out of New York, but in that case, so we see people talking about, like Ogilvy would talk about Ogilvy orchestration.
Mm-hmm. Y&R had the whole egg.
The whole egg. Meanwhile, in Chicago, where the organizational alignment, the ownership structure, wasn't nearly as aligned as it was in New York, the acquisitions, here you are. And then what happened?
Well, the way we got to integration was fairly simple. I got a call from Keith Reinhardt.
Okay.
John O'Toole was still running the 4As at that time.
Okay.
And John was a graduate of Northwestern.
Oh.
It's all incestuous.
Man, I mean.
So anyway, John was heading the 4As, and Keith Reinhardt, who was at DDB at that point, was the chairman for that term, for that year, or whatever it is.
And at that point, and pardon me, but this is pre-Omnicom, it was really Needham, but DDB and Needham went together, right?
Yeah.
So he ended up, okay.
Yeah.
So it's Chicago based.
Yeah, Chicago based.
Right.
Anyway, he calls me. Keith called me and said, "We've got a problem." He said, we're in the agency business and we're really struggling. We've gone out and bought the PR agencies. We've got the money. We bought the PR agency. We bought the direct marketing agency. We bought all of these guys.
Right.
We bought a ton of these things. We don't know what the hell to do with them." He said, "We know they need to be put together. We need to find some framework would you be willing to help us? And that's how this thing all started. It was the agencies that were driven by the agencies who couldn't figure out what the hell to do.
Now that we've bought it, what do we do?
Yeah, what do we do with it now? We got money, let's buy one, and then we'll try to figure it out. That's the typical agency approach. Let's buy it, and then we'll try to figure it out. So anyway, it came out and said, we had 2 or 3 meetings, and they said, would you be interested in helping? Well, we had been struggling with the same problem here.
Yeah, because you told me previously you were training people for a declining market.
Yeah, and well, we had already gone to that. See, we'd already, in the middle 80s, we had already gone to putting in the DM,
Okay.
direct marketing.
Right.
And the reason they came here, and they said, well, you guys are further along because at least you have been working with the same issues. And the same issues were, number one, that, they don't have a common framework. They don't have and everybody, it's all silos. And you get them inside and they fight like little cats and dogs and
Sure.
that sort of thing. So we said, yes, we understand that problem. So we started out on the basis of, let's try to figure out what we can do to make this thing work. And so that's what Dick and I were doing. Dick and I had already brought in the corporate PR. We'd already brought in the direct marketing. We had already gone to an integrated approach, and we were beginning to realize that, hell, we're teaching them all the same thing. They just call it something different, and then they're essentially coming out of here doing the same thing. So I said, okay, well, let's see what we can do with this thing. So by this time, Dick had gone to Kellogg.
Mm-hmm.
He'd gotten frustrated with the dean here. I don't know how in the world that ever happened, but anyway, he goes over to Kellogg and heads up their endowment program. He goes over to Kellogg, raises $40 million in a period of about 18 months. and the dean is sitting over here saying, well, I didn't know he could do that. I didn't know he had those kind of contacts. So you dumbass.
Yeah, by the way, we're giving away naming rights over here for half that.
Yeah. So anyway, so Dick was across the campus, and I was left with this.
Okay.
So that you know this.
That's
Anyway, so we're struggling here, trying to figure out what to do with it. Arnie Weber was had come in as the president of Northwestern, and did you ever know Arnie Weber?
did not.
He's an old labor lawyer from University of Chicago, and had been in the government. He'd been a labor secretary under some administration in Washington. Went to the University of Colorado, pissed everybody off at Colorado, and kind of had to leave there. The regents, I think, gave him a ticket to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So anyway, he comes here, and Arnie's meaner than hell, but he's tough. But he's tough, but he's fair. I'll say that. So he came here, and so I'm trying to make. So I'm making presentations to Arnie Weber saying we need money, we need support, we need help, and so on and so on and so on. So the program got started. We started the program, and I kept telling.
What year was this? 92?
No, it's been about 89, 90, somewhere in there.
Okay.
But I made about 2 or 3 or 4 presentations to Arnie, and Arnie was tough because he said, "I'll loan you the money. I won't give you any money. I'll loan you the money. You're going to have to pay it back to me." So
what was the big?
Yeah, or I'll come and cut your legs off. One of those things.
Yeah.
So I was doing forecasts and projections and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, we got his approval to do it, and I said I want to call it integrated marketing communications. He said, you can't do that. I said, why not? He said, well, because marketing belongs to Kellogg. So I said, well, what I'd really like to do is I'd like to have half our program, half our courses, have students take it over to Kellogg. And then the other half we teach over here is communication, and that'd be a perfect blending. And Arnie said, okay, if you can sell that to Don Jacobs, it's fine with me. So Don Jacobs was the dean over at Kellogg. So I go over to see Don. I said, Don, I got a real deal for you. I said, I want about 50 seats in your incoming MBA program, MM program. He said, are you nuts? He said, I'm going to sell you these for 1 year, and these are 2-year MBA programs, and I'm going to sell out 1 year of this stuff and not get anything back the second year.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, throw it back to Arnie, and I said, Jacobs won't let me have the seats. But I said, to teach the kind of program we want to teach, we need to be able to teach organizational behavior, finance and accounting, and all this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, why don't you just hire them yourself? I said, okay. I said, that's redundancy. He said, yeah, we're a private university. He said, we got no redundancy here. It's whatever we can make some money off of. So that's how we ended up. And I said, I want to call it IMC. And he said, well, Jacobs owns marketing. You can't have marketing. He said, if you can get Jacobs to agree to it, it's fine with me. He said, I don't have any problem with it. So I go and meet with Don Jacobs, and I said, Don, since you wouldn't give me any seats in your MBA program, I want to call this integrated marketing communication. He said, that's fine. He said, I don't consider you a threat.
Thank you.
And I said, I don't think I'm a threat to you either, but in any case, so that's how we ended up with integrated marketing communication. So, because I negotiated all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yes. In retrospect, there was supposed to be a tremendous theoretical breakthrough, but this being Chicago, it was a deal.
It was a deal. It was a real deal.
Now, was there a transition period from as I look back at degrees, I'm deeply confused. We have MSJs, we have MSs. They appear to be sitting next to each other in the same class.
Well, they were actually the same people.
Okay.
We had MSAs.
Yes, those I know.
When we went to an integrated program, you either got an MSA, you got an MSDM,
Okay.
an MS CPR.
Right.
And those who didn't do any of those got an MSJ.
Okay, which used to be the generalist track or something
Yeah, it was
like
the
that.
generalist track.
Okay.
So you come in and you could go down one of 3 tracks, or you could become a generalist. The generalist idea was that if you had 6, 8, 10 years of experience,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to set you off over here on the side, and
Right.
you can we're going to work with you, let you take what you need to take, and that sort of thing. With some brilliant concepts that were never executed very well. That was part of the problem.
Okay.
So we got into the early part of, we had our first class graduated in 91.
Okay.
They came out as MSIAMC.
Yes.
And it was because integrated advertising and marketing communication.
Mm-hmm.
Because the faculty was afraid that no one would hire anyone that had a marketing communications background.
So it had to say the word advertising.
It had to say advertising. And so that went on for maybe 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And then it evolved into an MS.
Yeah.
IMC.
Right. So we're still seeing and that was from the medium early 90s on. It seems that everybody came through with IMCs.
Yeah,
There's a period when it's quite hard to tell
our
people apart from the editorial people.
About 95, 96,
right.
That switched over to MS IMC.
Okay. Now, as I look back on the people who were going through the program then, and it probably reflects the output of the program. We're not sending you down to Burnett. We're sending you out to work for global corporations.
This was the big change.
Yeah.
The big change in all of this was that we had an increasingly expensive degree.
Okay.
And agencies simply wouldn't pay.
My very first conversation with Ted Spiegel and Paul Wang back in the 80s, when I was in the agency business, was explaining to them how I simply couldn't afford to hire
And that's
their
part,
people and put them in as account supervisors.
that's part of the problem. That is the
It
problem.
didn't work.
So the agencies would never, ever raise their salaries.
Mm-hmm.
So we just kind of veered off into corporate land,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a tough time
Mm-hmm.
for, well, not just recruiting, but it was a tough time for placement.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily because we didn't have a whole lot of contacts
In that world.
in the corporate world.
Sure.
All our contacts were in the agency world.
Mm-hmm.
The agency people wanted to pay $30,000,
Right.
and you go off to the corporate people, and they were talking 75, 80, 100, 120, depending on what their experience was.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take students long to figure out, I don't think I'm very interested in the agency business.
Mm-hmm.
That really upset the agency people, who had always looked at this program as a feeder system.
Mm-hmm.
And I made 2 or 3 or 4 presentations down in Chicago to the, I don't know what they called it, the agency, was it the agency council or some 4A's, I guess, was still running.
Okay.
And they said, well, you've got to do something. We're not getting your best people. I said, no, you're not getting our best people. You're not going to get our best people.
You pay half what the other guys do.
If you you're going to offer 35 and they can walk out the door for 100.
Yeah.
Why would they talk to you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've turned your back on the agency business. I said, no, I'm in a private university, and I want to educate people, but if I'm going to educate them, they have to generate a return on their investment as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we started switching to the corporate side,
Mm-hmm.
and we went at probably 20% of the students now go to agencies, and
I guess, yeah. Then there's the marketing services companies kind of in the middle.
Yeah. But I mean, it's been an interesting transition.
We shifted the composition of the student body shifted. I'm struck kind of in the late '90s. We got pretty international pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So now it's 45%, non-U.S.
You can blame that on me.
Okay, why? I blame everything else on you.
I blame everything else on me. I spent, starting in the 90s, middle 90s, I was doing a lot of work for Hyatt.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran training for Hyatt all over the world.
I remember you were always off in New Zealand running some training.
Always somewhere else. In any case, all of this was going on, and I was wandering around the world,
Mm-hmm.
making speeches and conducting seminars and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I got very famous in essentially Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it all came from.
Sure.
Because the first book that Stan and Bob Lauterborn and I wrote.
Who's Bob Lauterborn?
Bob Lauterborn was at the University of North Carolina.
Okay.
Bob had come out of he'd gone through the General Electric advertising training program.
Okay. The whole
Had been at international paper.
The whole Croton thing and all that stuff.
Yeah, and had been at international paper, been the advertising manager at the international paper. They set up a Knight Foundation
Mm-hmm.
professorship at UNC.
Mm-hmm.
And he applied for it and got it.
Okay.
So I had known Bob for some time, and we'd been talking about doing a lot of stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he got involved in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So he and Stan and I, actually, Stan and I wrote the book, and Bob wrote maybe a couple of chapters or something like that. The book came out, the Ogilvy people fell in love with it,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly the people in Ogilvy and Taiwan.
Okay.
And they translated it, and translated it almost immediately after it came out in the U.S. And they started taking it to China, and they carried it all over China, smuggled it in, as a matter of fact, because you couldn't take English, couldn't take translated American books in at that time. And so I became famous in China long before I went there. The book came out in 93, the Taiwanese translated probably 94, 95. By the time I got to China, and the first time I went there was in mainland was 2001, people already knew who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh yes, integration, we all love integration, so on and so on and so on. And much of it was because of the holistic nature, is
Sure.
bring it all together, and that's pretty much the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I was running around in China. I had been doing a lot of work for IBM and a number of other people in Hong Kong prior to the turnover, before they all headed off to Singapore.
Right.
So I was pretty well known in Asia Pacific, Australia. Had done a lot of work in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So
and you have an appointment down in Queensland.
well, I have an appointment in Queensland.
Yeah.
Have one in Finland. We'll have one in Cranfield.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, if you want to blame the influx of foreign students on
Sure.
me, on somebody, you can blame it on me.
No, well, for years I'd simply assumed that everybody who came from Taiwan was Paul's niece or nephew, because we had
No.
so many coming out of Fujian Catholic.
No, well, I mean, he had something to do with that. But hello,
Oh, hi.
hi
I
there.
have an appointment with you?
Yes, you do at 3:00.
And we're over.
Okay,
This was,
I'll be with you in just a minute.
we got to call this part one. It's like
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. You gonna write the book?
no.